Our next speaker is Lea Pica. She also has one of the top digital analytics podcasts in Present Beyond Measure. She needs to publish more, but that's my own personal opinion. She is director of visualization and storytelling at Search Discovery, and we're just really thrilled to have her here talking for us today. So come on, Lea.
All right. Hello. Can everyone hear me in the back okay? Over the giant wind tunnel. Okay, excellent. So thanks so much for having me, and I know it's getting to the end of the day. I'll keep the energy high. I just wanted to give some attitude because this actually represents a couple of firsts for me. It's my first speaking engagement in Philly, and I only live an hour away, so I'm so excited about that. Yay! It's also my first engagement where I'm wearing a headset. This is like a speaker's dream come true. It can look like Britney Spears teaching a cooking class. So very, very excited. And the speakers were amazing today. And I mean, especially, Tim showed us some really interesting ways of approaching data visualization from a new lens. And, there are lots of new, fancy up-and-coming charts out there that are grabbing attention. But today's session is a little bit more about giving you a foundation that you might not have been given when you enter the role of having to present information effectively. So we're going to actually be building a foundation and breaking a couple of patterns that you might be familiar with that is really going to set you on a path to success. So I'm going to kick this off with a really bold statement. After the next 40 minutes, you may never approach how you present data the same way again. Everyone go, ooh, very dramatic. But to find out if that's going to be true, I want to know if this situation sounds at all familiar to you. One of your clients / executives / bosses calls you up on the phone and is like, hey, can you put together and present some campaign results at next week's leadership meeting? Thanks, bye. And you're like, God. So you are really nervous because all the heavy hitters are at this meeting, everyone that matters to your career, and you really want to hit this one out of the park. So you are working round the clock, sifting through mountains of all kinds of crazy data, and you're distilling it into some shiny new insights. And it's now presentation day, and you are, there we go, and you are just showering your audience with your nuggets of wisdom. And you decide to take a quick look around the room, and you suddenly notice that it's becoming apparent that you don't have their undivided attention. Glazed eyeballs, a little drool, some Candy Crush Saga. I know I've actually seen that. It's not pretty. And by the end of that meeting, you're not exactly sure that all of those insights you worked so hard on got the impact that you were really hoping for. And by the end, of a few weeks pass and nothing from email or phone, total radio silence, you start to worry that all of your hard work has flown into what I call the dreaded data black hole. And, if this sounds at all familiar to you, I want to tell you that you're not alone, because this is actually my story. And I went through a very specific journey to help figure out why this happens, and I'm here to help you prevent it. So I call session, Get Their Attention, How to Present Results to Get Results in Your Organization. And there it goes. There's apparently some sort of clicker poltergeist happening. Can we not back by any chance? Is it me? Oh, okay. I might have clicked something. Okay, there we go. So, sorry about that. So, a little bit of backstory. Quite a few years ago now, I was sifting through some site search data, and I found something very disturbing. I found that the vast majority of people using site search were leaving right after their first search. So something really wasn't going right. And I did not want this information to fly into the dreaded data black hole. So I underwent a 3-year philosophical journey to find answers to this very deep metaphysical question. Why do bad things happen to good data? Why? And I would find all sorts of interesting answers to this question, but the one that I found at the root actually kind of surprised me. I'd like to introduce you to your audience's brain. Hello. So, the brain is a massive collection of neurons and glial cells and synapses, and they all bundle up to become your best friend or your worst enemy during a presentation. And believe it or not, everyone in that room with you actually has one of these. It's hard to believe sometimes, but they do absorb information in a fairly similar way. And understanding what makes it tick is what's going to get you ahead. And that's understanding things like, when you sit down and you start talking to them, you have about 8 seconds to grab their attention. That's it. 8 seconds. You actually have a longer window of opportunity to keep one of these engaged. And with mobile everywhere always, that window is growing shorter and shorter. Who's listening? Will was the first one. Yeah, see, this is not easy. I know you guys know what I'm talking about. Another thing that they don't really tell you in this journey is that repetition is a mechanism that helps commit your information to their long-term memory. So I don't know about you, but no one told me these things when I came out of analyst school and started actually presenting data. And what's more interesting is what they're really not telling you is that when you go into that room, what your stakeholder is really thinking is, hey, I don't actually care about what you do all day. I don't really want to hear about how hard your job is. I'm sorry. But this is what I really do care about. I want you to show me how to move my organization forward. I want you to show me in a way that I understand quickly and easily. And, this is the key, in a way that makes me want to act. Right? That's what the purpose of a meeting is. And oh, by the way, give me a count. Come on. It's being very shy today. Give me a count of hits, because that sounds really fun too. So it's a tall order for you guys when you kind of just want to crunch numbers all day. This is not easy. And I was suffering from the same problems. So it's because of that, my presentations weren't achieving 2 very important goals. The first is to maintain the attention of your audience. If it stays there, this is a good way to keep attention. And the second is to be memorable enough to make them want to act afterwards. 2 very important things. And my goal is that by the end of the session, you're going to have a whole new toolbox of tips and tricks that are really going to help your data and you stand out in the organization. Now, there's a lot of stuff to talk about, and I could talk for days, but what I wanted to do for you today is distill some of the most actionable pieces of my journey into what I call the 3 pillars of presentation enlightenment. And we're going to be talking about presentation planning and presentation design and how you visualize your data. Little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to be talking about various people, books, and blogs throughout the session. So when you see that symbol, it means it was a resource that played a really important part in my journey that I think will be great for you. And then finally, just a little bit of the Twitter. I'd love for you to CC me at Lea Pica on any tweets. And don't forget to include the DataVizPHL hashtag. Ready to do this? We're going to try that one more time. Ready to do this? Yeah. Oh, that's surprising. Okay, thanks. Excellent. All right, so let's get started with pillar number 1. This is something we often overlook in the presentation process. That is, stop and be your audience. Okay, so something really magical happens when you take yourself out of your own shoes and you put yourself in the shoes of the people you are going to be speaking to that you want to care about what you're talking about. So going back to our example, our stakeholder, what he's saying is, can you give me some campaign results? Now, I don't know about you, but in my days as an analyst, I got a lot of really vague requests like this that would send me on a sort of needle in a haystack search of gathering every number I possibly could and hoping something would stick. And that's not how you want to approach this. You want to put yourself in his shoes and really think of him saying, what do I really want? Why am I bringing you to this meeting? What is it about the work that you're doing that could inform decisions I need to make? Answer questions that I have about the data. What is it about you? So I want you to think about that. And with a little probing with this person, you may find out that what he's really saying is, our budget is really limited next quarter, so we have to scale back, but we want to stay efficient. Tell me where to put our investment. And maybe he's going to give you a blueprint of where to look on how to do that, rather than just hoping you're going to catch this magical number that they're looking for from a very vague request. So read between those lines a bit. And don't be afraid to ask. It shows a lot of value on your part by collaborating with them to understand what those needs are and ensure they're going to be met during that meeting. So everyone's time is well spent. So another thing I want to talk about in the planning process is how we phrase our insights. So I want to talk takeaways. I love this word, takeaway. We say it all the time. What are the key takeaways? So this was an interesting exercise for me. You may be familiar with this gentleman. Maybe. He's like a kind of up-and-coming person in the analytics field. Avinash Kaushik writes for Occam's Razor, and he did a thought leader conversation on the Digital Analytics Association where he took questions. So the question that I asked was, what is the number one struggle that analysts and marketers have in presenting their insights? And I thought he was going to say things like, really crappy charts or PowerPoint suck, but that's not what he said. He actually said, analysts need to be able to distinguish between data and insights. And I was like, whoa, that's deep. And it got me thinking about that. What is it about the way that we are phrasing our data that is preventing insights? And the definition of an insight is something that allows us to give us a capacity to have a deep and intuitive understanding of a person or thing. And for the most part, what I'm seeing is that doesn't actually happen. So I like to play a little bit of a game with my bigger workshop students, and it's called, What's the Big Story? So I want you to think about, if your insights were a BuzzFeed headline, and they walked out of the room with that one quotable headline, what would it be? Okay, so I'm going to show you the difference. In this little game, we're going to play called Statement to Insight. So we're going to use a very generic landing page test scenario that I came up with, but hopefully, and it can really be applied to any kind of data that you're working with. So this is how, when I see information presented to me, how it's presented most of the time. Landing page test results. Yay. This is like the world's most boring statement ever, because all you're doing is you're actually just saying a statement. You're not actually telling a story of what happened. You're just explaining what it is that it is you're going to present. So this is how I see a lot of slides and charts titled and whatnot, and I want us to think bigger than this. Next thing, landing page B had a higher conversion rate. Okay, this is what I call an observation. And what an observation allows you to do is connect dots for the audience. They're not there to interpret the chart for you. You are there to interpret that chart and wrap a story around it for them. The thing that we want to do in presentations is create the least amount of work for the audience possible. The more work that they're doing, the less they're paying attention to you. So this is allowing them to not have to work to understand what's happening in your data, and it's valuable. The majority of the insights you'll be presenting will probably fall in this area, but that's okay. But let's say you have even more information. How are you going to present that? Okay. Landing page B was a significant winner, likely due to the additional explainer video. Okay, so this is what I would call an insight You've talked about significance, which tells them that this is something that they can take action on, or you recommend they take action on. And you've attached a theory behind why the test results happen that way. That can follow very nicely into a test recommendation. And then you've packaged this whole thing where not only have you shown up to the room and interpreted some data for them, but you've brought a recommendation for them that is based on really sound interpretation, and you've done all the work for them, and now you can collaborate. So I know this is seems very easy peasy to kind of construct it like this, and not all of your data points are going to be that clean. But when you do have that kind of information, I want us to think about presenting it that way in something that inspires action. That makes sense. All right, so those are some ways to help be your audience in terms of what it is that is going to resonate with them when you're talking to them. I want to move on to pillar number 2, and this is a doozy. It is use your tools wisely. So how you use your presentation tools is a critical juncture in the presentation process, where you can actually end up creating a presentation that's your wingman helping you, or it's a presentation that kind of acts a little bit more like Kanye West and completely steals your thunder and takes the attention away from you. And you do not want to bring Kanye West into a presentation with you. So I hope that you'll be able to hear this, but I brought along a little video. It's my favorite Super Bowl commercial from a few years ago, and it's about a job candidate who goes on an interview and he brings a chatty little stain with him who kind of steals the show, and I feel it's the perfect analogy for getting drowned out by a bad presentation. So let's see if this works.
So tell me about yourself.
Well, you know, an organizer, somebody who does not need details. I'm actually very, very good with groups. I've surpassed all my goals, my previous position, my prior job, and your competitor. My personality and me have surpassed their own goals.
Get famous at mytalkingstain.com.
I just wanted an excuse to show that video wherever I go. I love it. But no, for me, when I saw that, I was like, this is exactly what's happening when we're bringing in presentations and they actually take attention away from us. And when we think of a presentation tool that we all use where this might happen, can anyone shout out what tool that might be? No, the tool, the actual tool. Someone said it. PowerPoint, yay, we love PowerPoint. Yes, we do. So PowerPoint has an interesting history, actually. It made its debut in 1987 on a Macintosh, believe it or not. Yeah, and it was designed to innovate on this old overhead projector and transparency method that does anyone old enough to remember? All right, totally dating myself. By the way, that method wasn't really based in neuroscience either. But nevertheless, fast forward several decades, and it is now believed that PowerPoint lives on over 150 billion computers worldwide and is used to present something to someone somewhere 350 times per second. Is that crazy? Now, whether or not that's actually a good thing is kind of debatable, because with PowerPoint becoming the Kleenex of presentation tools, we are suffering from a global epidemic of really, really ugly and boring and, oh God, absolutely bizarre presentation slides. And they are plaguing our conference rooms. And I do want to point out there's a bunny and a hot dog on the same slide here, and I didn't make this up, I promise. It's true. It has gotten so bad that an industry journalist named Angela R. Garber actually coined a phrase, and you may be familiar with this already, and that is death by PowerPoint. Yeah, and you know, I think it's kind of a shame, because I don't actually think this is a PowerPoint problem or a keynote problem or a Prezi problem. Don't hate me, but it's kind of a people problem. You know, as a population of business professionals, we are not given the tools to use this tool to our advantage. And that's what it's supposed to be, a tool to help deliver your message into your audience's brain. That's how I want you to think about it. Now, to our defense, what the tools could do a better job of is imposing more control on us to enforce design best practices. But they don't currently do a great job of this. So that's why I have a job here today to help give you some of these controls. And what's the first control that I can give you that will completely transform your presentations? Unload the bullet points. Okay, here is a simple fact. The only person in the room that wants to see all these bullet points up here like this is, guess who? You. Yes. The presenter. And I guarantee if you use them like this, they will murder your audience's life. I've seen it happen. So I have a kind of provocative and disturbing analogy for why this happens and why it's so important to break this pattern. So I'm going to hopefully disturb you now. So I want you to imagine that you're in a meeting presenting to the most important people to your career. Your career is on the line, and you're in the middle of presenting, and suddenly you decide to stand up in the middle of the table and you trench coat flash them. Goodies are hanging out, their eyes are everywhere, and you're like, guys, but it's too late, because this is what bullet points do. They expose all of your information and give it away at once, and that completely loses their attention on you. Are you disturbed? Is this disturbing? No? I'll have to go crazier next time. All right. But I'm hoping this is sinking in, because this is a very important idea. I want you to think a little bit about more striptease, not trench coat flash, and that's as risque as I'm going to get. So, you know, this was a hard concept for me to wrap my head around in the beginning. So I was like, I want to know why. Like, why do we love our bullet points so much? And, you know, on the surface, I think it's pretty clear. We come into this job, and that's what we see everyone else doing, and we're not really shown a better way, right? But I think what's actually happening at the root here is more serious. And that is, you know, we want to use our slides as a crutch to read off of during the presentation so that we don't have to prepare. And I'm telling you, this is a huge mistake. I want you to repeat this mantra over and over and over. Your slides are for your audience, not you. Okay? Oh, it's doing it. Yay! Clickergeist. Wow. Any way to jump me forward? Okay? So we're going to let it marinate with that one right now. Your slides are for your audience, not you. They're not a script. They are a tool to deliver your message into your audience's brain. And I want to tell you, your boss doesn't want you to read you a bedtime story during the presentation. Let's go one more if we can. There we go. Oh, all right, we'll go there too. You know, he wants you to have a dialogue with him. And if you do bullet points that way, they're going to read the entire thing to themselves and completely tune you out. So I want to make sure this is really clear. Now, I learned this principle from this fabulous book called Slideology by Nancy Duarte. She's like the queen of the stage. And this is also an excellent book in terms of presenting to corporate audiences. Really recommended. And one of the ideas that really hit me hard when I was reading it was to learn to create ideas, not slides. So just think about that for a second. So an idea can be one of your metrics or learnings. It can be a theory you have about a test. It can be a question that you want to ask your stakeholders. But the underlying philosophy is that each slide is communicating no more than one big idea at a time and allowing the audience to really feel into it. In fact, you may want more than one slide to communicate just one idea. I love that split slide technique, especially for data, because it allows you to build some anticipation for people, which actually builds attention, and it allows you to keep the pace for the audience so they're not jumping ahead of you, because you are the narrator. You are Yoda in the story, okay? Now, what this might mean is that you may take one heavily bulleted slide, and you may want to break it up into a collection of smaller and more digestible ideas. And that may result in more slides. And sometimes people's blood pressure goes up at the idea of creating more slides. But I want to get away from this fear, because it's been my experience that as long as you're creating slides that properly support the idea you're speaking to at that moment, no one's going to be counting how many slides that you're actually using. And it's also not like we pay for every slide that we use. Last I checked, they're unlimited. So I really want to bust out of that sort of convention that we have to be confined in a container with these slides. So now, right about now, oh boy, here we go. I want to take a pulse check. How is this landing? Is this making sense for everybody? Yes? Okay, good. I was going to keep going with what I had anyway, but that's a relief. All right. So what's the next control that I can give you that will make a big difference? Resist the fluff, as hard as that might be. Cat people, anybody? Cat people? So you're all in denial. That's okay. We can talk later. It's fine. It's fine. So what is fluff? So I define slide fluff as all of the visual, ancillary, unnecessary, repetitive crap that is on every single slide of your presentation and doesn't actually add value to what you're speaking to. So this is where branding departments come out with pitchforks for me, but this is just the truth of, of how we see information. So fluff includes things like logos, watermarks, page numbers, little bars, big bars, and all kinds of fluffy doodads that don't belong on every single slide of your presentation over and over. Now, if you have something like copyright and confidential, I'm not going to get you in trouble with that. There are laws around that. But everything else is what I'm talking about. And I want to give you kind of my philosophy on the use of company logos on every slide. If you're in an internal meeting, I am pretty sure everyone in that meeting knows the company that you all work for, so you don't need a reminder every single slide. So if you have wiggle room to work around that, it's actually going to serve you. And keep them for the first and last slides, if possible. So there's a lot of clutter on our slides happening, and it has a really sinister effect. It's very distracting, and it does one thing really well, which is to completely interfere with the absorption, that instant absorption of a message, and it slows people down. It's a very, very real thing. So I learned this principle of fluff and distraction from two amazing books called Presentation Zen by Gar Reynolds. These were the books that launched all my ships in terms of presenting better and more effectively. I can't recommend them highly enough. And especially the one, Design, that one was really like hands-on toolkit for bringing some feng shui to your presentations, like understanding fonts and colors and shape and everything. But the valuable lesson that I got from that is that it helped me learn how to design my slides like a designer would. You know, there's this whole discipline around information design, but again, it's not something that we're given when we're walking into jobs as people that present information. In fact, a study done a few years ago by the ICIA found that of professionals who counted presentation as a core part of their jobs, only about 7% of them had any sort of professional design training. And I believe that that's leaving us with a pretty big skill gap when we're being tasked to get people to care about the information we're talking about. Now, some of the concerns that I get at this point is like, I'm not an artist or designer, I'm an analyst or a marketer. And I totally understand that. But being that this sneak peek is pretty much my best effort at art, so that's me, and then this mutant cockroach is a corgi, believe it or not. I can prove to you that you don't actually have to be a professional artist to design slides that are going to effectively communicate your information. I promise. Now, speaking of art, there is one kind of art that never, ever belongs in presentations, and I still see it today, and that is clip art. Yeah, so nothing says the presentation was built in 1997 better than that like drawn high five, handshake, clip art. Oh, I have to share this. One of my workshops had this one. This was special. I'm going to frame that one from my house. But it can actually undermine the credibility of what you're saying, so don't let it take you down, please. But imagery is actually something that's really important in presentations. So what I want you to think about is, instead of that guy, I want you to learn how to harness the power of real imagery in your presentations. Big, full bleed, colorful life imagery. So one of my favorite books that I've ever read, and this book will make you a better person in general, is called Brain Rules by John Medina. He's a neuroscientist and an expert at studying human behavior. And one of his most interesting lessons from that book, as it related to presenting, is that vision is actually human beings' strongest sense. It dates way back to our days on the Serengeti, when our lives depended on remembering where we buried that bone, and these berries over here will kill you. And not much has changed on an evolutionary basis. So that's why even today, powerful and relevant imagery can actually increase the recall of information in your audience's brain days later, and that's better than with just text alone. So, and I'm saying powerful and relevant. So, if you have a section header, use an image. If you have a conclusion or a powerful quote, use an image. And I'm going to be showing you some interesting ways to leverage imagery to really create some powerful moments. Because another thing that they do exceptionally well is they stir emotion within an audience. I mean, this is why National Geographic is what it is. There's nothing like imagery that tells a story. And that's what I want you to be able to do with imagery, is tell the customer's story to your audience using imagery. So during a presentation, a well-told story activates all of these different areas of the brain. Nothing else works like that. This is why we love Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones and all these things. No one would do Game of Thrones as a PowerPoint presentation. So, it might be hard to think of how to do that in a data storytelling context, but I can show you some ways that I've worked with in the past. So, in the past, I've presented results like this many times. Yeah, 80% of people left our lead capture form. Yeah, maybe it's because, our page wasn't responsive, it sucked, but I guarantee this is the best way to help your executives catch up on their email in front of your face. Believe me. So how about using an image, and not even a graph or anything like that, but maybe a disgruntled looking customer. Someone that could be your customer and he's annoyed because he's trying to get through and he can't make this work. 80%. And look, I'm using big fonts and stuff here. That's a big deal, guys. Don't let it be lost on your audience, And, another way to use imagery is through your actual web experience. It was the actual problem that we found. The page wasn't responsive, so it looked awful. And that's probably why we were losing people. And what I did here is I used the web experience, but I seeded it in the context of the medium, the audience, not your audience, your customers would actually view it in. And that context actually brings the story right to your stakeholders. And it can help create compassion for them rather than just words saying, this wasn't responsive and it didn't work well. So those are just a couple ideas that I have for really spicing things up in what could be a drier, numbers-heavy presentation using imagery. Now, when it comes to using imagery, I have more good news. Data is actually imagery. So your data is some of the most powerful visual tools at your disposal. And we definitely saw an example of that in Tim's awesome presentation. But just like PowerPoint, you have to learn how to use it right. So that brings me to my third and final pillar, which is to maximize the absorption of data in their brain using basic, easy to learn, but important data visualization best practices. So maximizing data absorption, it's not something you learn overnight. It's trial and error, it's lots of practice, and it's a skill that you have to use, okay? You have to hone over time. And where it really starts is learning to choose the best visualization for your data. I think Nathan Yao, Flowing Data, once said that there are 9 ways to view composition. We are paralyzed with choices, but I would argue that there's usually 1 or 2 most effective ways that are going to allow you to highlight your actual story. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And the thing I'm going to tell you is that the data visualization platform doesn't necessarily know what the best choice is going to be for you. They have algorithms to kind of pick out a few choices for you, and they'll give you 10, but ultimately that decision, comes from your experience. But there is a resource that I can give you that I have found extremely helpful. This is a fairly new book by Stephanie Evergreen. It's called Effective Data Visualization. And what I love about this book is she talks about the most common chart types, as well as some chart types you may not be familiar with. But she starts the choice with a business question. A business question like, I care about this one number, or I care about how this number changed, or this changed, let's see how this changed because that changed, or how did these 2 things look over time? So starting with a question approach, I have found has been really, really effective for starting to practice and get into the habit of choosing effective chart types. Now, I already had a spoiler alert from Dave's presentation for this, but when we think about the best chart types, I do want to bring it back and talk about one of the worst ones. So you've already probably know what that is, which is pie charts. So I do want to go over this just one more time, just to make sure it sinks in. So what's funny about pie charts is they're actually kind of a lot like real pie, where they're really warm and comforting to an executive audience because they know them really well and blah, blah, blah. But they can also kind of be like real pie, where if it's not done really well, you can get massive indigestion from how terrible they are. And I still see pie charts like this pretty frequently. And really quick, I'm just going to explain why they're not the most advantageous thing to represent composition most of the time. So when your brain sees a pie chart, which is a circle, it has difficulty calculating the area. Oh, sorry about that. Go back. It has difficulty calculating the area inside each segment and comparing them to each other, which is the main purpose of a pie chart. Now, I am going to break protocol and say there is one scenario that has been approved in the industry for use, and I'm asking to use this on a sparing basis. But that's when there are 2 segments, and one is overwhelmingly larger than the other, that you are not forcing your audience to do any work and figuring out which one is bigger. You didn't hear that from me. He's daggering me right now. That's the only time. So if I had to give you a starting point for choosing a chart type, if you are showing ranking categories, comparing categories, or composition, really a bar chart is going to be your best place to start. But I could also make the argument that bar charts can be just as badly abused as pie charts if they are not executed with data visualization best practices. So I'm going to take you through a really quick exercise. I'm a bit of a crunchy granola hippie, so one of my favorite things to do every single day is detox. I love detox. So I have developed a chart detox program. Actually, it's a several-step program. And what that really means is it means not coming into your PowerPoint and taking your data, dumping it in, choosing a template. This is an available template, and walking away. You are not done yet. This could be a bit of an extreme example, but I've seen things like this. So what chart detox really means for me is sorting the bar by priority to help them comprehend the ranking faster, killing 3D, all that visual noise is reduced, labeling all the data points directly, and uniform coloring, especially because you are encoding one metric here. And what uniform coloring can do, especially with like a nice emotionally neutral gray, is you can use a second color to strategically emphasize the key data point in your story. That is where the story starts to come in, right? Now it's not just a backdrop, there's an actual story happening. And with color is a very important visual principle to use in your data with intention, not arbitrarily. You know, especially with red and green, where red and green have significance in our culture, but they're often part of a default color palette of many of our platforms that we're working with, and that can affect the interpretation of your data to your audience. So I want you to really be careful and don't let your data visualization tool decide what matters to your audience for you. Okay, use color with intention. So now we've cleaned up our chart, but I want to go back to that concept we were talking about in terms of what that story is and going from statements to insight. So, okay, so we have a chart here, and very often I'll see, you know, all right, this is number of sales by channel. That's what this is. And this is a great way to bring this guy to your meeting and just watch everyone pass out in front of you. So we don't want that. So what I've done instead here is I've changed title, which is the most important real estate on your slide, by the way. The upper left-hand corner is the first place they look. And I've changed that to say, yes, I've interpreted this data. This is where we get the most sales. Then underneath, I have a little subtitle, and that's what describes what the chart is, just in case no one is figuring that out on their own. But the big headline story is an actual story. This is called a McKinsey Title, and it will help guarantee that no matter how people interpret your chart, the message and story you're trying to convey is going to be taken away accurately. And that can be helpful if someone steals one of your slides out of your deck and hands it to someone else without you as the narrator. That can help maintain the context. So speaking of context, you know, I have one graph here and it's simple and I've started a story. You'll notice I have like a ... at the end here. So maybe there's actually more to this story. So here, what if we added conversion rate on top of just the volume of sales and aligned them up side by side so we can see what's happening with these two metrics here? How does the story actually change? So this is a great way to showcase two related metrics to each other. And I'm actually going to describe why this is a really good solution to you in a minute. But this is a really fantastic way. It's called a side-by-side bar chart, and all of the categories line up. And this way, I'm able to actually say like, well, okay, so we know where our volume of sales are. Maybe we have opportunity with email because the volume's a little lower, but our conversion rate is so much higher. And that's a way that you can tell a story this way. This is what data storytelling means to me. Hope that makes sense. So I want to give you a clue to just some of the more common viz violations that I come across in working with my students. And I'm not trying to make your life harder. I just want to give that disclosure. So one of the first viz violations is, don't hate me, dual axis charts that are on different scales. So a few years ago, I found this sign in a funny shop. On this site in 1876, nothing happened. I just thought it was cute. But it actually occurred to me later that this is a really good analogy for what can happen in a dual axis chart on different scales. So have that happening when two lines or a line and a bar or these two data points intersect with each other, it can create meaning. And what it's saying is on this date, nothing actually happened, but your brain might be saying something happened because we're naturally designed to create meaning from intersection. And it could imply correlation or causation when there actually isn't any. It can be a bit of a slippery slope. Now, if you don't believe me, I would like to introduce you to this man. His name is Tyler Vigen. He writes for a blog called Spurious Correlations. And the entire blog is about how misleading dual axis charts with different scales can be. So this is one of my favorite examples. Apparently, the more cheese that you eat, the more likely you are to die by being tangled in your bed sheets. I mean, it must be true. That's why I went paleo, but I mean, there are hundreds like this that are make really visually compelling arguments, and there's just no factual basis to them. There are a couple other drawbacks to dual axis charts as well. It takes a little bit of extra work for the person to figure out which axis belongs to which data point in the chart. That's more work. And especially if you're using bars and lines, the line chopping through all the bars can create interference trying to interpret how long that bar is. So there are a lot of drawbacks to this. And again, that side-by-side bar chart that I showed you before is an excellent workaround for that. Another violation I love, stacked bar rainbows. So pretty. So step bars are a very ambitious chart. They want to show you a lot of stuff. They want to show you volume and trending and composition all in one view. But the problem is having them all together in one sandbox makes things really messy for you to try to figure out really what is happening. So especially because once you have one data set, one series on the bottom, you don't have a common baseline for a lot of the other ones. So it can be super messy. So a solution that I have for this is a paired 100% stacked bar and a volume bar. So this is another side-by-side bar chart example where, and here I have two segments, but in this case, I want to clearly answer the question of what my composition looks like over time, and a 100% stacked bar chart is going to be able to do that better. And if I want to understand volume as well, where in this case, it was really important to understand the volume here, or else I would have thought the first two items were, the most important. This is a really great way to see the full picture without having them cross wires for people. So that is something to give thought to, if possible. Another violation, giant line markers. So line markers very well interfere with the soft nuance of a line that you might have. You could lose some importance there. Even better than that, overlapping data labels on your line markers. Yay! So you don't want to label every data point because then none of them have importance, right? So what I typically like to do with lines is I'll label the first data point, the last one, the maximum and the minimum, or I'll just label one that matters the most because I'm telling a particular story. Other thing I see a lot are legends on time series charts. So it actually takes work for your audience to jump from each line and figure out which color and which shape corresponds to what. And all that work makes them not pay attention to you. So one of the things I like to do is I like to label the ends of each line with the actual label so that there's no question which one it belongs to. If you're using different colors, you can go the extra mile by color coding the labels to match the line, and then you're going to have super fast interpretation of what belongs to what. So those are some of my favorite things to help you look out for. Now, a lot of times what I hear people complain about is after they hear all these things is, oh my God, I don't have the time to do any of this. This was due yesterday. And I completely understand that. So I do have a little bit of a trick for once you've cleaned up your chart and you've gotten it looking a certain way and you're like, you know what, I want all of my future bar charts or line charts to look at that. You can actually save your charts as templates that live inside PowerPoint and Excel that remember all of the formatting that you gave that particular chart. So you would just right-click on the chart itself, you would hit Save Template, and it becomes part of the custom chart type menu that you can select from. So that's helped me, save me more than once. Hope that's helpful. So I learned all of these wonderful little tools from a guide called the Wall Street Journal Guide to Information Graphics by Donna Wong. So this book is not going to tell you the brain science behind why these things are important. It's a fast read that shows you what to do. So I keep it on my desk. It's like my user manual all the time. So highly recommend it if you present data at all. Now, if you're interested in taking a quick snapshot of all of the books that I mentioned today, here it is. And all of these books, I will say, had a very different but each very profound impact on my journey. And you're going to find them chock full of information that's going to help you. So I'll just give you a second to do that. All right. Okay, so that is the 3 pillars. So remember how I talked about how repetition is a mechanism that commits information to memory? That's what I'm going to do right now. Always so important to recap your key findings and recommendations at the end of your presentation. So to recap, first, be your audience. Remember to put yourself in their shoes and ask, what do they really want? And what are the questions that you alone can help answer for them? Use your tools wisely. Create a presentation that will be your wingman and not Kanye West. You know, this presentation had over 150 slides in it, but I'm hoping that you didn't notice. And it's just PowerPoint, nothing fancier than that. And finally, learn data visualization best practices to help maximize the absorption of data so that they're doing less work interpreting and they're doing more work talking to you about it and creating action. So before I jump into questions, I just want to leave you with a little thought. You know, when you are panicking at the 11th hour and you're like, I can't make this work and my bullet points suck, and you know, I just want you to remember this. You are your presentation, not your PowerPoint. You know, this is where the good stuff is. And that's why they're bringing you to that conversation. So that is something that I want you to remember as you're creating a presentation. You are the most important person in that room at that moment. So before I actually wrap things completely, I'm going to take questions now, and then I'll finish with something a little bit after. So I would love to know, you know, what are the kinds of challenges that you might be facing, or what kinds of things resonated for you from this? Who has the first one? That guy back there. I know that guy.
So because you won't do this, if a guy wanted to get a bunch of people in his company to learn these techniques directly from you, how would a guy go about getting in touch with you to help this, make sure this happens across his or her entire organization?
I'm thinking this is the opportunity for a shameless plug. So I'm so glad that you asked that. You can learn more about me at leapica.com. So actually, if you are interested, I mean, I do teach these concepts over a period of days, actually, where we go much, much deeper into this, talking about the entire art of planning and design and delivery, because it really is a whole package. But you can find all of the content. I have lots of great posts. I have my podcast, and there's a newsletter that you can sign up for. It gives you lots of great tools. But I would just encourage you to send me a note on my website if that is something that resonates with you, because what I've developed is literally the tool set that I wish that I'd been given when I started as an analyst 13 years ago. And it was a long road there, but it's very gratifying to give that to people on the same path. More questions? I'll probably take like 2 more because I think we're over a little bit, or 2 more. Okay.
One of the challenges we have is sometimes after a presentation, we got to share the deck out with people. And at that point, sometimes you want to have a little bit more information, the stuff you said, and you have to have that in. So how do you, not make a presentation new, but also have it in a deck that you can share with people?
Okay, so it was a little hard to hear. How do you create a presentation but then also share it with people? Do you mean like in an offline capacity?
Often after a presentation, you're asked to email the slides, but then some of these things come in the way of people understanding what's going on.
Right. Yes, thank you for that question. So you've just asked the number one question that I get at every single session and conference and workshop is, and that actually speaks to, for me, the heart of why our live presentations are going wrong a bit. So oftentimes when we're creating a presentation, we are creating it thinking we're going to have to email it afterwards. So we make it sort of look like a document, like a report. And then we're putting that in front of people and then wondering why they're not paying attention to us. And the thing is, those are completely different formats of consumption, and it's not serving either audience very well. So I actually developed a method where you create 2 documents. So I always develop from the live presentation. That's my top priority because that's where I gain the most visibility, and it's most likely I'm going to gain the most action from that live meeting. So I create the live one with all of the principles that I talked about here, but then I create a second document that pulls off of that has notes in the notes section with the slide that acts as the narrative that I would be giving if I were standing in front of you. Because you don't want a presentation to stand alone without you, then there's no point for you to be there, right? But if you're not there, the notes section of the PowerPoint slide can function really well as your voice. And I have actually documented this entire method in a blog post. It's at leapica.com/handouts. It's my most popular post because I think this problem resonates so much in corporations. So I'd love for you to check that out and let me know what you think. One more?
I got one back here. So I've watched a couple of your videos online, and in seeing this presentation, it seems like you do most of your data viz in Excel. And as we saw in a previous presentation, people are moving away from Excel, they're using it less. Do you have any examples of like you doing some of this stuff in Tableau or Power BI or any other tool like that?
I actually have a couple. I've done some work around Domo. I wrote my first post on Domo about creating brain-friendly bar charts in Domo, and I'm still tackling each platform in a way because they're all so unique in the ways of like removing some of the clutter and highlighting the information that you want. I actually am in the midst of publishing something about Google Data Studio because that has its own things. Power BI, I think, is next. But yes, it's true that when I present, I actually visualize in PowerPoint because the resolution that I'm working with is intact at any size, and I don't worry about like broken links coming in and such. And what I want you to take away from this is not just this is what to do in Excel, but any platform that you're working with, I want you to look for the things like clutter and labeling and intentional color and things like that, because those principles are going to translate to whatever tool you're actually working on. All right, so thanks for those questions. I'm going to wrap things up quickly. As mentioned before, I do have a podcast, and someone very special has agreed to be on it, Mr. Will Reynolds. So it's going to be great, I know. But a lot of great guests on the show, Tim Wilson included, and I think you'll find it really valuable. And I want to give you a bit of an apology now. So the goggles are off. Not only will you never look at how you present data the same way, I hope, you're also never going to look at how everyone else is presenting data, and it's going to hurt a little bit. It's going to be a little painful, so I'm sorry about that, but what can you do? And if any of what I talked about resonated with you, especially in terms of how to push this through on a cultural level, that's where I want to give a shout out to my mothership, Search Discovery. We are amazing at helping cultures push changes like this through. So come talk to me if you're interested in learning more about that. And I want to leave you with a little bit of inspiration from the great Aldous Huxley, and that is, facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. And that may be true, but I think getting ignored kind of sucks, and I don't like it. And I don't like it for you. So please don't let bad things happen to your good data. You work so hard crunching your numbers and distilling your insights all day. Why don't we stand up and pave the way for them to make a real difference for our clients and our stakeholders starting tomorrow? So on behalf of myself and Search Discovery, I bid you viz responsibly, my friends. Namaste.